I'm Ash Bennington. We are here with a conversation today to talk about the nature and future of Bitcoin. We have two fantastic guests who viewers of Real Vision will already be familiar with. Mike Green, Chief Strategist and Portfolio Manager at Simplify Asset Management, and Robert Breedlove, host of the What is Money show. Gentlemen, welcome to you both.
Thank you for having us, Ash.
Glad to be here.
Robert, let's start with you. Obviously, for people who watch Real Vision, for people who know your work, they know that you're a passionate advocate for Bitcoin. You're very well known in the community. For people who are not familiar with your views, give us the 50,000-foot overview of what your views of Bitcoin are and why you believe it's important to society and specifically to the welfare and well-being of the United States financial and economic system.
Sure. So the United States was founded on the principles of life, liberty, and property. We have the pursuit of happiness in place of property in the American Constitution, but life, liberty, and property was actually inherited from the Magna Carta back in 1215. And it's my fundamental view that particularly strong property rights are essential to civilization. It's the only way we can resolve disputes over scarce assets without conflict. And if property rights are strong within a society, then people cooperate, people trade, people compete peacefully, and they create economic abundance. When property rights can be violated, it's much more encouraging for people to fight over the rights to those particular pieces of property. So I think in that scope, for me, Bitcoin is really important in that it is just the most expensive form of property to violate in human history. And given where the world is today, as governments worldwide, where we are violating property rights rampantly via fiat currency inflation and other interventionist measures, I think Bitcoin is a powerful technology to hold those aggressions against property in check. So I think it's very important to the future of the United States, and in many ways gets the United States back to its foundational principles.
So, Mike, there you have it. Robert's view, obviously a very sort of pro-American view, an idea that Bitcoin is part and parcel of what's made the American experiment great and powerful in the past from an economic and political standpoint. What are your views? What are your thoughts? And what's your reaction to what Robert just said?
So one, I think that it is cavalier to interject property rights as a substitute for the pursuit of happiness. I understand the origin claim from the Magna Carta, but it is very explicitly not included for that reason in particular. It's not the same thing. The pursuit of happiness, and in particular property rights, are addressed within the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, in which we have the dynamics of eminent domain and a takings clause in the Fifth Amendment that specifies that taking can occur if being for the benefit of the public use and with just compensation. The claims about inflation being theft or anything else being theft is a dispute with the use of that takings capability, right? It's a claim that they can't do this because I don't want them to. But it is very explicitly addressed within the U.S. Constitution that we actually, as a society, have to work together, and we have elected representatives who we rely upon to make good judgment with that. That Robert happens to disagree with that is irrelevant to the discussion.
So we've talked a little bit about the philosophical framework. Obviously, you guys have some disagreement about the way that you fundamentally see the nature of the U.S. Constitution. But let's talk a little bit more pragmatically about what this technology does, Robert, and why you think it's so essential to the economic competitiveness of the United States that Bitcoin be part of our future.
Yeah, sure. So it's probably helpful to define property. It's the relationship between the owner and the asset. So it's not the asset itself. It's the exclusively acknowledged, typically legally enforced relationship between owner and asset. And the importance of property is that, again, we live in a world of scarce resources, right? The wants of every human heart are basically insatiable. So everyone wants more. So how do we reconcile that? How do we reconcile scarce resources with unlimited demand? Well, we do it through conflict or we do it through property. And again, the social experiment that is the United States is the greatest testament to the abundance and wealth that can be created under a civilization of strong property rights. When we were initially founded, we had very low and predictable tax rates. There were very low levels of government intervention. And that actually led to the flourishing and capital stock that we all enjoy today. And it's not just in the U.S. we've seen this play out. We saw this in Hong Kong, where low and predictable taxes, low levels of government intervention also led to an economic boom. This is tied to economic axiom, basically, is that taxation reduces productivity and wealth creation. This is also in the Laffer curve, which is interesting that as you actually reduce tax rates, you can increase tax revenues up to a point. So I think that to get to the U.S. Bitcoin strategy, why I think it's so important, you first need to understand that this fundamental axiom of property and how important it is to civilization. But the U.S. is in a very interesting position because we have a global reserve currency in the U.S. dollar. We have enjoyed this exorbitant privilege, as it's been called, for quite some time. But with the emergence of Bitcoin, I think there's a very unique tactical advantage that the U.S. can use. And frankly, I'll walk through this step by step, and then I'd like to hear Mike's feedback on it. So I think if you own the fiat currency spigot, you can basically produce currency ad infinitum and use it to acquire whatever you want. This is what governments use fiat currency to do in the marketplace, right? If there's an economic downturn, we increase the money supply, we buy toxic assets, we buy bad corporate debt, whatever it is, and we bolster markets. Well, the United States could equally use that position to start to acquire Bitcoin quietly, even. They could do this via the shadow banking industry. And after they've established a position, I think it would be intelligent for the United States to actually announce that they're holding Bitcoin in the national treasury. They could effectively induce this geopolitical game theory and front run further accumulation. If you understand the game theory of money, it's like to be the first adopter is to benefit disproportionately in anticipation of later adopters. And basically, Bitcoin's following this path that gold monetized along previously, just on a much more accelerated time scale. The United States could even go so far as to leverage the SWIFT system to facilitate Bitcoin distribution into other nation states. I think, and then on the back of that, as you've induced this game theoretic dynamic to play out, you can actually use the purchasing power gains that would accrete to the national treasury to increase tax revenue